Hello everyone and welcome back to another edition and another week here of the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. My name is Christopher Shepard. Thank you all for being here yet again for yet another exciting week of talk, an exciting weekend of sports action we just had, both the NFL and college football, and I've got you covered for this Monday edition of the show. Going to start off, though, talking about tonight's game between the New Orleans Saints and the Kansas City Chiefs on Monday Night Football, and then we talk about the weekend of action that just transpired, going over some of my fantasy stars of both the NFL and college football weeks, and I'm also going to give you a little bit of a Heisman update as things are getting a little bit weird and wacky in that situation. And then finally, I'm going to conclude by giving you some fantasy advice, specifically in terms of starting and sitting certain players for tonight's game. Maybe you need one of those last-minute boosts to your fantasy squad to get over the hump, to get you that win for this week. But without further ado, I do want to remind you yet again to like, follow, and subscribe to put this show in the network if you do feel so inclined. It is greatly appreciated by all of us here at the network, especially me and my fellow podcasters. We love hearing and receiving your feedback. And if you want to do it more contingent to this specific show, keep on making yourselves available to the Super Chat, Super Thanks, and Super Stickers features here on YouTube. They're a great way to contribute and interact with the show at large. You can press the $sign, contribute a tip, leave a comment, and I will read it here on air. Your personal opinion about what I say on the show, or maybe just something that you want to add to the show as a whole. Needless to say, everything you do for this show is greatly appreciated by me, and also by any of the fellow podcasters you might leave comments on their videos as well. I'm pretty sure they appreciate it just as much as me, and overall the network grows as a result. But without further ado, let's jump into that Monday Night Football preview. Should be a very weirdly exciting game, shall I say, between the New Orleans Saints and Kansas City Chiefs here. And what I mean by weirdly exciting is that there are a lot of storylines and there are a lot of players that can make the difference in this game. But we don't necessarily know how it's going to transpire, is what I mean. It could go many different ways. It could be a low-scoring game, now that you know both of these offenses aren't necessarily firing on all cylinders, or this could be the opportunity for someone on either team to break out and turn this into a real game. Let's start, with the obvious, the Chiefs here. The Chiefs, obviously, still undefeated, finding ways to win by hook or by crook, and as a result, still being perhaps the number one Super Bowl favorite right now. However, last week, Rashee Rice goes down, torn ACL, potentially out for the entire season, most likely out for the entire season, even if they get to the playoffs and make a deep playoff run. So, the big question turned into, who's going to step up? Will Xavier Worthy, a raw rookie who they kind of view as more of a gadget role kind of player, or even Travis Kelce, someone who is still one of Mahomes' favorite targets, but over the past couple of weeks, and not until last week against LA did he have a big game, has shown his age. So that's the big question that this Chiefs offense has to figure out. They still have a lot of depth. I like a guy like Justin Watson, very reliable receiver. He's not necessarily, that inspiring, so to speak, but he's still someone that moves the chains. He's still relied upon in this offense to make an occasional big play, and so he could be someone to keep an eye on. Juju Smith-Schuster was good for them a couple years ago in that Super Bowl run. This year, maybe not expected to hold as much of a big role as he is now that Rashee Rice has gone down, but maybe he could be the catalyst in this offense, but we still don't know. But as long as Patrick Mahomes is at the quarterback position, I expect that there is a chance that big plays will still happen in this offense, and the Chiefs offense will still find ways to win because it's Patrick Mahomes. On the Saints side of things, this is an offense that a lot of people were skeptical about coming into the season, and through the first two games were performing at a historic rate. Derek Carr looked one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. His deep ball, which I said was his saving grace, looked like one of the best in the NFL, and every single offensive player was playing in sync. Over the past couple of weeks, though, their offense and defense has come under scrutiny with quote-unquote late game collapses in games they definitely could have won had, the entire team stuck to the game plan, if you know what I mean. In the game against Philly, they gave up two big plays, actually, to both Saquon Barkley and Dallas Goedert at the end of the game that led to the Eagles winning that game. And then in Atlanta, they also did it. And I feel like this Saints team is a good team. They just don't necessarily, I believe, have the nous to close out games they should win. Right now, they could also be undefeated coming into this game, and they could have the upper hand. But looking at the betting odds, which I haven't yet told you, there's a reason why Kansas City is still favored in this game. It's not just because they're at home. They are favored by 5.5 Kansas City. The over-under is 43.5. KC is minus 230 to win. New Orleans is plus 195. So as you can see, the Chiefs are still heavily favored. And the reason being is that the Chiefs have found ways to do this before. The Saints are just in an offensive slump that unless they show us that they can get out of it, we have to take as gospel. Because the Saints' offense has never been as convincing as the Chiefs have been, sans, superstar players throughout different years. So, whereas the Chiefs' kind of offensive woes and overcompensation for it is expected, we don't know how the Saints, more so still with the superstar players they've always had, but kind of more in a prove-it situation, will perform, if you know what I mean. That being said, this game still could be weird. And the big question for the Saints is, how is this offensive game plan going to look? Because we haven't even talked about the Chiefs' defense, which is still going to be very effective in this game. Steve Spagnuolo, one of the great defensive coordinators of all time, is always going to have a game plan, and it's going to involve pressuring Derek Carr. And my big question subsequently from that statement is whether or not Carr's deep ball can threaten this Chiefs secondary. The Chiefs secondary is one that I love, but still has the propensity to give up the big play. So, one of the bigger kind of components of this Saints offense has always been the Carr Rashid Shaheed deep ball connection. We saw it in the first couple of games where they had 2 long touchdowns in those 2 games to start up their season. And since, it hasn't been as integral a part of what they're doing. Which leads into my second segment, or second point, about how the Saints offense could look. Alvin Kamara, in this game. Because I feel like a large part of what the Saints want to do is predicated on whether or not Kamara can have a big game. Because let's say, their game plan is, we want to pound the rock with Kamara. We want to get him the football in early downs to kind of alleviate the pressure that Carr's going to be facing. And ultimately, once we feel like we can take a shot play down the field, it will be there for us. It will open up different avenues for Derek Carr to kind of hurt the Chiefs secondary. But then the other game plan is, if the Chiefs are going to pressure Carr, that will leave a lot of space behind the safeties or who's ever back there, the corners in their system to exploit as well. So it's going to be a different balance play by play for the Saints in this game. They either will lean on Kamara if the Chiefs are giving them that, or they feel like they can exploit the Chiefs secondary should the Chiefs come after Carr. And that's how I feel like this game will be even closer than people think. But in terms of my overall game pick, it would be silly of me, it would be foolish of me to overlook the Chiefs just because of potentially season-altering injury. I think that what the Chiefs learned last year is that potentially just having an all-world quarterback could be enough. Patrick Mahomes doesn't really care, I believe, who is on the field for him at the wide receiver position. He just cares about them getting open. I don't think his frustrations last year with the wide receiver core as a whole. It was frustration with their inability to get open for him, and thus that was where the tensions rose. This year, I feel it's a bit different. I feel like Patrick Mahomes is so focused on the task at hand for the Chiefs that he doesn't care about how, as Andre enters the chat, how are you doing, my friend? I don't necessarily think Patrick Mahomes really cares about whether or not, his wide receiver room is decimated. He just cares about the goal at hand. I know it kind of sounds selfish to say, well, he did feel like, after being a part of the injury to Rice. But at the end of the day, if you're Patrick Mahomes, I feel like you know your own abilities and you know how this team is tailor-made to fit around it. You can find different ways to kind of exploit different teams without, relying on Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice was nice in that he was becoming that wide receiver one. But you don't necessarily need that if you're the Chiefs, and you don't need to panic. You still have the big play threat with Worthy. You still have a semi-reliable tight end, albeit an old one, in Travis Kelce. And you have supplementary pieces like Justin Watson and, Juju Smith-Schuster that could step up into these roles. Yes, their run game is also a big hit, but they don't necessarily utilize their running backs that often. And Kareem Hunt, is kind of a bell cow back who can wear down defenses if he needs to. So at the end of the day, I'm picking the Chiefs, and I think I'm going to stick with it. Because right now, the volatility of the Saints offense leads me to believe that, yes, they can stay in games, but can they win them with a complete performance? And I haven't seen that just yet. With the Chiefs, I kind of feel like they've been through this before. They know the task at hand, and they'll find ways to supplement the loss of Rashee Rice. But you don't have to take that as gospel. Let me know what you think in the comments, because it's going to be, like I said, a weird game. But on the other side of this quick break, we'll be right back to talk about my NFL fantasy stars of the weekend. I only have 3. I could have had even more, but these were the 3 guys that I truly believe took over the NFL weekend. We'll be right back to talk about them right after this short break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Hello, everybody, and welcome back into the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you, as always, by the GSMC Sports Network. Before we get into our second segment of today's show, I do want to remind you yet again to consider liking, following, and subscribing to the show and the network as a whole. It is greatly appreciated by all concerned here at the network, especially me and my fellow podcasters. And also, as you can see on my screen, leave a super chat, super thanks, or super stickers feature here on YouTube in my comments section, and I will read it on the show, read your opinions. I definitely want them because I love your input on the show. It really makes the show grow. Most importantly, if you do it with our other podcasters, go check them out as well. It will make the network even better, even more popular, so that even more fantastic content can be distributed to you guys as well. But without further ado, let's jump right into our second segment of today's show, talking about my fantasy stars, starting off in the NFL, and then on the other side of the next break, we'll be talking about college football. But to start off with the NFL, they only have 3 guys for today, and 2 of them played in perhaps the best game of the season thus far, especially because it was a divisional contest that meant so much. I could have picked a myriad number of players, maybe even a couple of defenses, because a lot of fantastic defensive performances, a lot of defensive touchdowns this weekend as well in the NFL. But these are the 3 that I feel really solid about talking about, and I want to deliver to you guys for your consideration. So without further ado, let's talk about these 3 fantastic players from Week 5 of the NFL season. Starting off at the wide receiver position. And this guy's going to have to become even more and more important for his team. They are in a bit of a hole. I can't necessarily say whether or not they can get out of it because their division is so competitive, and this was a divisional game, like I said, that they were playing in. But as long as they have this wide receiver at their disposal, they have a chance in every single game they have moving forward. And that is, wrong graphic there. Wrong player there. Let's just skip ahead to Jamar Chase here. He had a big game, albeit in a losing effort. Very painful loss for the Cincinnati Bengals. My condolences to any Cincinnati Bengals fans that might be watching. But it was a very fascinating game. But it proved that the Cincinnati Bengals can still hang with everybody, and their defenses and their kind of woes are more defensive than offensive, so to speak. Jamar Chase, 10 receptions, 193 yards, 2 touchdowns in this game for a grand total of 41.3 fantasy points. He still maintains that wide receiver 1 status. So if you're feeling down about how the Bengals are playing, don't feel down about how Jamar Chase is playing. Because in terms of a fantasy perspective, he still is going to give you big, gaudy numbers week in, week out. And not for nothing, the Bengals have a quote-unquote easier slate of games coming up. Yes, the Giants, they just won against my Seattle Seahawks in a game I do not wish to talk about, but I feel like week in, week out, the Bengals are going to be competitive. As long as they have Joe Burrow, as long as they have Jamar Chase, as long as T. Higgins is still there, I just feel like there's nothing to really worry about offensively. The defense is where the problems lie, and if they don't figure that out well, then they could be in a hole that they can't dig out of, even to get to, say, 7 wins. But as long as that offense is clicking, like it has in the past couple of games, they're going to be in games, and Jamar Chase is going to continue to deliver for your fantasy team. So therefore, he is one of my fantasy stars of the week. My second fantasy star, going back, is a guy who I was kind of not all in on headed into the season, right? Because he was a supplementary running back who I didn't necessarily know a lot of coming out of college, but has completely supplanted Travis Etienne in Jacksonville and might be the X factor going forward for what Jacksonville is going to have to do to try and compete to get back into the NFC South race. I mean, the AFC South race, rather. And that is Tank Bigsby. And Tank Bigsby is a classic back, right? He's not someone who is going to give you explosive play after explosive play. He's going to wear you down. There's a reason his name is Tank. And I feel like with Jacksonville, you have to kind of, A, take the pressure off Trevor Lawrence, but B, most importantly, give him a game plan where he feels comfortable with his best trait, and that is the deep ball. So if you run the football effectively, like they do with Tank Bigsby, then I guarantee you, and this is what happened in this game against Indy, the deep ball will be open for Trevor Lawrence, and he'll feel more comfortable throwing it. Tank Bigsby, kudos to him for having 13 carries, 101 yards, and 2 TDs, 25.9 fantasy points in this game, because it shows a blueprint and a way forward for the Jacksonville offense. I'm not as, completely worried about how it profiles going forward, because it shows that Doug Peterson assessed the situation. Maybe not necessarily Doug Peterson, but perhaps even Trevor Lawrence as well assessed the situation, saw ways they can improve, and they ultimately had a game plan going into this game. And hopefully going forward, for any Jags fans out there, this is what the Jags offense will look like. But Tank Bigsby is still going to be an X factor no matter what they do on the offensive side of the ball going forward. But it gives me confidence, that at least Jacksonville has a contingency plan for where, if Trevor hasn't settled in after a couple of games, they can go to a guy like Tank Bigsby to deliver the goods for them. So he is one of my 3 NFL fantasy stars of Week 5. And the last one, I think you guys saw this coming. It's Lamar Jackson at the QB position. I feel like Lamar, what he's done over the past couple of weeks is admirable for someone who had to not necessarily go through too much change on the offensive side of the football with this team and how Derrick Henry kind of comes in and complements him. But he did have to kind of adjust his style of play a little bit, right? Because at the start of the season, the problems within this offense lay in the offensive line, their inability to protect Lamar. Now, the way they're kind of accounting for it is by having Lamar be a passer, but also keeping defenses wary of Derrick Henry, right? Because you can't necessarily load the box as a team like Baltimore to stop Derrick Henry. Because what I thought, and what perhaps many defenses thought, was that, well, Derrick Henry is not like any back that has been in Baltimore in the Lamar Jackson era, and that he's more of a workhorse. He's not like a guy like Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, who can't go off for a 35-year run anymore, and besides, he is aging out. That mentality is out the window from what we've seen from Derrick Henry. And we're not going to see anyone like Derrick Henry for very long who has that longevity into his 30s, so to speak. I think that how this helps Lamar, in turn, is it allows him to say, okay, if Derrick Henry is keeping defenses honest, then perhaps less and less pressure will be faced by me. And so I'll have ways to improvise, say, if my offensive line does break out, but I'll have plays where I can take shots down the field, and defenses will also have to respect my arm, which makes it an even bigger challenge to defend both me and Derrick Henry. And this kind of leads to a performance like this, where he's 26 for 42 for 348 yards and 4 touchdowns for a grand total of 33.42 fantasy points. Now, going forward, as Andre said, have to worry about Henry and Lamar's read option. That's one big part of it, because what I loved about how Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins played the read option is that that play, at least on the defensive perspective of things, was going to be a big chunk play, no matter who got the football in that situation. So I do feel like in that regard they are kind of limited. But what Derrick Henry does do better than I believe either Edwards or Dobbins is not to stay healthy, right? Because that's a big part of why, perhaps the running attack in Baltimore grew stagnant in those seasons that Edwards and Dobbins were there. But what I love what Henry does is that he's just a straight workhorse back who, if he gets out in open space, you're in trouble. Because he's a brilliant example of balance to speed. He's someone who can absorb that first hit, take you with him for another 3 to 4 yards if it's a chunk play and you're wearing him down, or he can just burst through the middle for like a 75-yard run or an 87-yard run like we saw in the first play against Buffalo. He's just a very interesting back. I did doubt whether or not he did fit into the system right to start the year, and that's on me because I kind of viewed it as an old age thing and not necessarily, a whole approach thing for the Baltimore offense. But all those fears have subsided of what we'll see, or what we're seeing from the Baltimore offense. And now I kind of trust that no matter what happens throughout the game, no matter what goes awry for Baltimore, they'll have a plan. Because if Lamar's doing this, and you still have to worry about Derrick Henry, good luck to the rest of the AFC. Because this looks like perhaps the most dangerous team here. And they're only going to grow into the season, right? And the fact that, yes, just beating the Bengals in a divisional game isn't as big as, say, beating the Steelers, who they're still chasing down. As Andre said, favorite props for tonight. For tonight, before we go to the break, I guess, say, I am wary of, Alvin Kamara, because I want to see Derek Carr be aggressive in this game, as Andre said, I can't trust Derek Carr against this team that historically owns him. Well, I can't trust him either, but at the end of the day, I do want to see more of the deep ball than Alvin Kamara, right? Because you still have to account for Carr's deep ball, because I still trust his deep ball as a quarterback in the NFL. But that being said, I still think out of all the prop bets for the Saints, Alvin Kamara is the most appealing, because he's going to get 20 to 25 touches still in this game. On the Chiefs side of things, I kind of feel like Patrick Mahomes' yardage total is going to go up. For some reason, I feel like he's going to find different receivers, play mistake-free football, and ultimately find a way to win this game. Not necessarily through the explosive play, but maybe there will be one or two in this game. But he's going to compile a lot of yards in doing it. So take the over on Patrick Mahomes and cautiously take the over on Alvin Kamara, because I still think Derek Carr can be an X factor in this game. And that's just me. Let me know what you think in the comments about my fantasy stars, about anything about tonight's game, anything. But we do have to take a quick break. And on the other side, we're talking about college football for a little bit, for 2 segments actually. Going on my fantasy stars, and then 2 segments from now, my Heisman odds update. But we'll be right back after this short break to talk about that, so don't go anywhere.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is
Hello everyone, and welcome back into the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. Hope you all are enjoying the show thus far. We are now taking a quick respite from the world of NFL, and now we are transitioning a little bit into the world of college football. And what a weird and wacky Week 6 it was. A lot of different upsets. Subsequently, a lot of different player performances that I have to shout out. A lot in the earlier windows as well. A lot of interesting performances. And I want to kind of respect different players, maybe not those that you're familiar with, but some unsung heroes of this past weekend in college football that I want to go through. But I do have to, without, disregarding them, give my full respect to the Vanderbilt Commodores for that upset of number 1 Alabama. As Andre says, do you like Kelsey Yards? And we get another comment from Caesar Rangel. Welcome to the show, Caesar. I'm not sure we have seen you in this comments before. Andre says, do you like Kelsey Yards tonight? I personally don't. I think that Kelsey is someone who can occasionally make a big play now, but despite that big game last week against LA, I think that, he's not going to do that. I think that you're going to have to take the under here. I expect unsung heroes for the Chiefs to step up. And then, addressing Cesar, hey man, if you can help me with this 14-man redraft PPR trade, I would appreciate it. I get CD and Alexander Madison for Brian Robinson, Ramondre Stevenson, and Tank Dell. And he further said, my running backs are Jacobs, Cook, Robinson, Ramondre, and Charbonnet. My wide receivers are Drake London, Deontay Johnson, I believe, Devontae Adams, Tank Dell, and Ladd McConkey. That is a huge load to give up, but all the players there are kind of trending down. And not for nothing, Alexander Madison is a very underrated back. And you have the running back room depth to kind of account for a weak link, should Madison not live up to expectations. So, as Andre says, that's a highway robbery, take CD. I would agree with you. I would agree with Andre and take CD. And, since your running back room is so deep and your wide receiver room is so deep as well, and all the players in your wide receiver room are trending up or tend to trend up, then I would definitely do it, because this is a 3-player trade where you feel like you're losing more than you're getting, but you're taking a chance on an underrated player at a position group you're already well stacked in, and you're taking a kind of season-altering kind of receiver to bolster a receiver room that's really trending upwards. I love Drake London. I love Deontay Johnson. Devontae Adams, wherever he goes, is going to be someone who's going to get a lot of targets. Tank Dell could get a lot of targets. We don't know what's happening with Nico Collins in that Texans receiving room. And then Ladd McConkey, let's hope he really are well known, but players who kind of fit into this narrative of upset victories. So without further ado, let's jump right into, as Andre also says, thoughts on Olave at 60.5 yards and Shaheed at 49.5. I think that those two values for these players are, ones that I feel can hit, because Olave is still the wide receiver 1, and Shaheed is someone, as Cesar Rangel says, thanks to the advice, liked and subbed. Thanks to you, Cesar. Hope you enjoy all the content we have to offer here at GMC. Going back to Andre, though, I think that these are kind of applicable hits here. I feel like Olave, like I said, still the wide receiver 1, so going to get the targets. And Shaheed, I feel like he'll have 1 or 2 big plays that will make the difference in that bet. And so I'm not necessarily comfortable in saying that he will, have enough to potentially hit, but he's always something to gamble on a little bit. That's the whole point of this Saints team. You never know who could beat the game script, who could alter the game script for the Saints. Thank you for that comment, Andre, but I do have to get into my fantasy football stars of college. First one I want to talk about at the quarterback position, a lot I could have picked. I could have picked Diego Pavia for his gut performance against Alabama. I could have picked Cam Ward for his coming performance against Cal yet again. But this guy played on Friday night, a guy a lot of people might have forgotten about, even playing in college football right now.